Over the years, NERF has brought all kinds of new technology and design elements to their blasters that have made modifying things really interesting. In that respect, the modifying community has risen to the challenge not only to take advantage of new technology that these blasters present, but also of new technology in general. And one of the things that I've really seen growing rapidly has been the use of 3D printed parts. Now, I really like the Kronos blaster, and not only is it my first rival blaster, but it's also the first blaster I've ever bothered to go out of my way to get some 3D printed parts for. So when Drac made that video of the stuff from Foam Technician, I knew I had to get some. I wanted to go a little more in depth with some of the parts and pieces on here, just to give you a better idea of what you can expect from these, and to see if it's worth it to upgrade your Kronos blaster. Now obviously, these are both the Deadpool versions. These will clearly work on the white ones that are on store shelves now. But I got, essentially, spent like $68 worth of gear with shipping included on all of this equipment, and I'll kind of break it down to what goes, what all is here, what's working, my opinions on them, so that way hopefully, again, it's helpful to you guys. Inside the blaster is the first modification that I was kind of on the fence of at first until I realized how much harder it would be for me to try and produce something like that on my own. And I'm talking about, there's a spring spacer in here. Now, talking about those old modifications from days before, when we used to put coins and such in the back of Mavericks to compress that spring a little more and get some more range. This is the same concept, only that same concept with the coin won't work because there's a rod that actually goes through where the spring surrounds. So Foam Technician designed a spacer that has this exact cutout built into it. So it fits perfectly, it's pretty easy to install, although don't let the pistol fool you. If you've never taken apart a Kronos, just keep track of things. It's pretty there's not a whole lot of wasted space in here, let's say. But yeah, so this spacer works really well, and I was able to see performance differences between this and the stock blaster because I literally have two of the same blaster. And I noticed that this is getting closer to standard rival ranges. Now, the Kronos is dialed back just a tad from things like the Apollo and the Helios and things like that. I think they're measured around 100 FPS. And these are measured around 90. And this small spring upgrade seems to bring things back up to stock performance of those blasters. So enough of a noticeable increase in performance to make a difference, but not so much that it's going to make this thing hard to put back together because it's under more compression. And also it's still fairly easy to prime. I don't need one of those big clawback things, and I don't really need to kind of mangle this guy because there's no overpowered like K26 or something that's in there. So it was only $2, and I feel like it's been worth it. It was simple enough and beneficial enough to warrant the cost. Next up on top here is actually just a plate that replaces the existing one. On the stock Kronos, there's this flap here that covers the loading door, and you can still fire with this guy off. So a lot of people just take this guy off and just load stuff from the top, so that way it's one less step. It makes things a little bit easier. I was wondering if I didn't purchase this, if using the speed loaders would be more difficult, and that has not proved to be the case. It really seems to be more of an aesthetic piece that, I mean, it works for me because I like the black on red look. I like things looking complete instead of a part missing from here. So I do like the look of it enough, but you've got to be on the same page as me to make that $5 for this piece that's really just aesthetic. There's no functional side to it that I've been able to find to make it worth it. But again, easy to install, especially if you've already got the spacer. While the blaster's apart, just put this guy in there while you're at it. And it doesn't really open anymore, which is fine, because you don't need to open it anymore because it's open from the top, so you can load stuff in there. Speaking of loading stuff in, the clickbait of the Kronos world is speed loader, and this guy, I'll just show you, it's literally comes right out here, done, loaded, 5 rounds in there. And this goes deep enough to where I'm not having an issue of any of these. I've never had an issue with it kind of halfway loading the last one and having it pop out, because these are spring loaded in here. When they're in, it's firm, it's not going anywhere. So I've been really happy with how well this has worked. There are a couple other nice little design elements to this. It does work fairly smoothly. It's not the smoothest in the world. It is still 3D printed, so there's a little bit of grain to this, but it doesn't really slow down the mechanism from sliding so much. At the very end here, it's actually got a slight ridge, so that way when you load the ammo in here, they don't fall out. I haven't had any issues with these guys falling out the bottom or anything of that sort. The one issue I have had is just figuring out which way these are actually faced. So when I've already used them, it's in this state, and I throw it on the ground or whatever, something like that. Go to pick it back up, and I start loading it on accident from the wrong way. It'd be nice if there was some kind of visual, even just like a different color or something on the end to show, hey, this end is exposed, which means that it's empty, so fill it up this way instead. This end doesn't have the ridges to keep those balls in. It doesn't need them, and so I'd be halfway through loading, they'd be falling out. Why is it? Oh, I have it wrong. I'd have to go back around and fix it, and it was slightly embarrassing. But yeah, so maybe just something I would change on these, because they are all one color. These aren't the red and black versions that are featured in Drax's video. There wasn't an option to get the red and black, which I'm slightly bummed about, but the black still looks great on this blaster anyways. The only other complaint that I would have about these is really not so much these, but trying to put them back on the blaster is a bit of a hassle in the heat of the moment. When you go to put these back on, you gotta be really exact. I mean, they're rounded off at the edge just ever so slightly, but once you've done the speed load, it's not very quick to try and get it back on the blaster. Now, you could just say, well, that's fine, just throw it and leave it. In a competition setting, I would agree with that idea, except for the fact that now people can be trampling over your $10 speed loaders, which are just 3D printed. There is some give to it. So I don't know how this would do underneath my foot. I'm not willing to sacrifice a $10 speed loader to see how much force it can hold up to, but I'd much rather take the time to put it back on the blaster. I suppose it would be easier to put on here if these just clipped in and clipped out, kind of like the magazine holders on just a top magazine-fed Rival blaster. Those just pop on and pop off. If this was a similar type of material, instead of the same 3D printed material that's pretty rigid, which is good, but I wish I could just clip them in and clip them out for ease of use. That would make the speed loaders that much faster to use while still keeping these on the blaster. As a result, it is also quite easy just to take rounds and load them back in here. Again, they're not going to fall out anytime soon. They really do stay in there, so it's nice to have empty ones on the blaster to fill up more in the field while you're using it, so that's rather nice. More specifically, onto these holders, they really both face the same way. It's just I have one pointing one side, one the other, so I can have both on the Kronos. The rail is barely long enough to support both, which is fine, but you can also have 2 on one and 2 on your other. The only trouble is dual wielding these. While you can fire them both simultaneously, trying to load them both is a bit of a hassle, so I've opted to trick out one of my Kronos's Kroni, I guess, whatever, on this one, instead of trying to do kind of a dual wield situation, especially since the speed loaders require another hand to be able to use quickly. So yeah, you really kind of turn your Kronos into a 25-shot rapid reloading blaster, and it's really nice. This upgrade to the power is a nice punch. This being open up on top, again, you could just leave that off, but I really like the look of it. Really happy with how solid these are fixed on the blaster. I've never had an issue with this stuff coming off at all. It does add a bit of heft to the blaster, I will say, but I expected that. While they are 3D printed parts and it's just plastic and some foam rounds in there, it's still pretty light considering, and yeah, I still like the fact that you can cram 25 rounds worth of stuff on here without it being huge and unwieldy. It's still a pistol, it's still easy to use, it still looks great, it doesn't really sacrifice the look of the blaster too much, and that just looks a little more menacing, in my opinion, than just the standard blaster. So, kind of fun, kind of neat, kind of happy with my first excursion into 3D printed parts. The link for this is in the description on my video, so if you'd like to explore these more, go check it out. As of this video, most of his stuff for Foam Technician is Kronos based. There are a couple other things that you can try out, but these are just the ones that I opted for and went out and bought and tested out. So If you got more questions on how this stuff works or my experience with them or things you want me to test out, leave a message in the comments and I'll get around to it. Thanks for watching, guys.